and welcome back to the Grimm Chronicles, the second one for 2022. And the Grimm Chronicles are just where I give you my update on how the reading has gone over this past week. And so I finished, the book that I should have finished last week, The Leopard by Lampedusa. And I finished it quite a while ago, so it's already some time has passed, and so my thoughts, I had to kind of remember things a little bit. For one thing, it kind of progressed in a way that I hadn't expected. So it had been sort of moving along in its way, showing us this patriarch and his lifestyle on Sicily, and his and also the relationship of his kind of favorite nephew to this young woman. And then, so I would say that the last chapters are, in a way, they kind of raise it higher than they're good. And one of the nicest chapters, or most interesting chapters, is this one called A Ball, where we see the ball through Don Fabrizio's eyes. He takes it all in, and what's interesting and nice about the whole ball sequence is he's very much on the periphery. He's very much sort of watching it almost, and he's watching the women, and kind of in his way. And it's almost seems like you sort of sense that he's getting older, even as the ball is happening. And so a lot of what I've been talking about is how it's so patriarchal, and a lot of it does have to do with Don Fabrizio's sort of view of women. We see his way of objectifying them and looking at them in a certain way, and that's actually really quite well done, and quite I like that, the ball chapter. But then what happens, and I hadn't expected this at all, is we jump forward in time. There are two forward time jumps to 1888, and then the last chapters are 1910. And so the 1888 chapter, I don't think it's a big spoiler. It's not really a kind of on this edge of your seat type book anyway. It's called The Death of a Prince, and it's his demise, his chapter where he slowly seeps away. And I don't know, this may sound strange, but maybe some people understand it. I actually like it when we see not exactly tragic, sort of almost normal, or almost sort of peaceful passings of people in fiction. I'm thinking of, there was one chapter, I remember, this is a strange thing to bring up in the midst of talking about The Leopard, but the only Jonathan Franzen novel I've ever read is The Corrections. And I actually remember one of my favorite characters was the father. I really liked the father and the way he was written, where Franzen wrote about the father. And part of it is that I do kind of like extremely internal points of view, if they're interesting enough. And what happens with the father, it's sort of interesting and maybe a little sad. He actually has, I think, Alzheimer's or something. And so there's a chapter in there that's from the point of view of someone who has Alzheimer's. And so you never know how accurate the depiction is. But it wasn't unsettling. It was sort of it was fascinating to read it, because I thought it was well done. And it was almost there was a solace or a peacefulness to it. Anyway, and this chapter, even though it was sort of, I felt, I liked it too. It was sort of, it did a good job of depicting how, when you're in this almost at death sort of situation, how you kind of are wrangling between getting what you want for yourself, but you're unable to because you're so sort of incapacitated. And having to sort of, no one really gets what you want exactly, which is, of course, difficult. But anyway, so I like that one. But then in the last chapters, we kind of go back to my issue with the book, which is the sort of extremely sort of patriarchal stance. And it has to do with almost at a plot level. So the last chapters take place in 1910, and they're all about, they focus on the three of his daughters who've all remained unmarried. So it's this depiction of spinsters, these three spinsters who two of them at least, have kind of found solace of a certain sort in the church. So they've become sort of naively religious, and they've collected relics which turns out to be, they're not all as, what they thought they were. And then the main daughter, the one who kind of has a bit of a different head on her shoulder, is Concetta. I think is her name, Concetta. Yeah, she's very interesting, but I don't think he did enough with her. Like, she takes on this sort of martyr, and it turns out that she did kind of there's stuff to do with the fact that the nephew married someone else and not her, and it's just something about the way he wrote it. He could have, I think, there was potential here for him to write them in a way that would be more kind of poignant still and sad, but giving them their due in a way that he doesn't really do. I think he belittles them, and there's a lot of condescension towards them. For one thing, there's a lot of condescension from the people in the book, the monseigneurs that come to visit them, all the churchy folk, men, of course, who come to visit them, are extremely sort of condescending towards these three women. Why would they not be? Because considering the time, 1910, and these three ladies. But then there's one point, and I even kind of made a point of course now I can't find the piece. I made a sad face, where, and this is not, so a lot of times the condescending sort of attitude is through the voices of the priests. But there's this one sentence here that really bugs me, and it says here, and it's not, it's just the narrator, So it says here, the three Selena sisters were, as we know, deeply offended by the inspection of their chapel. But childish and above all feminine in mind, they also drew a certain undeniable satisfaction from the thought of receiving in their home a prince of the church. What is he saying there? Feminine in mind. I mean, and it's all things negative, shallow, superficial, submissive to hierarchies or sort of authority figures, male authority figures. Is that what he means by feminine in mind? Excuse me, writer of this novel. You don't get away with that, especially not because it is 1958, and I've just started Fathers and Sons, or, a couple of days ago, and that's 1862, and that's not doing that. I mean, it's not really about women either, and there's a lot of patriarchal stuff going on in Russia in the 19th century, for sure, but I just had to take a star for that, because that really kind of bugged me, and even the sort of not allowing, I mean, I guess I think I'm going to try and give him sort of benefit of the doubt that he's trying to show something about the decline of the family with the fact that the three sisters remain unmarried and kind of become married to the church, but in an ineffectual, self-centered type of way. That he's that it's about in a sort of Thomas Mann type way of everything is an allegory for what has happened to the family. And then I was sort of thinking along the lines of that is the fact that Don Fabrizio is such a sort of sensualist and like kind of cannot conceive of women in a different way. Is that also making a statement as to why the family didn't remain powerful or didn't sort of go with the times? And I don't think so. It's more like, I mean, it does have to do with the fact that Don Fabrizio cannot see beyond, but he sort of does see beyond. He sort of sees it happening, but he doesn't know or doesn't see how to stop it from happening, I think. I don't know. And the demise, the fact that times are changing. He doesn't see it enough, or he doesn't know what to do about it changing. And also connected to his worldview in general. Anyway, so I gave it 4 stars, and I said on the Goodreads, and I stand by it, the final image is sad and hilarious at the same time, and almost worthy of giving a half-star back, and that's all I'll say about it, because it's just perfection. That last little thing that he does is good. But, I still contend that there's a little bit of stuff going on here that I just don't like, that I personally don't like, and I think the book suffers from it, for me at least, for me as a reader. Moving on to the project. So remember I talked about my 2 projects, Finnegans Wake project and Miss Macintosh project, and I was looking at last week's video to get a kind of sense of where I was, and then yet again, I say this so often, it seems like it was much further than only a week ago. Things change a lot in my mind, at least. So back then I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to stick with both of them. And if I give up one, it's going to be Miss Macintosh. And this week, I've almost already kind of decided to give up Finnegans Wake. I mean, not give it up. I'm not DNFing it for sure. You know, do not finishing it. I'm putting it aside, but I don't know when I'll come back to it. And so, what happened there? Well, I guess what happened is what happens with a lot of people who read Finnegans Wake. It's not really reading. You're deciphering. I mean, if you have a lot of free time or free mental space, you could sort of say that you're you kind of can get lulled into thinking you're getting it, and you can just kind of go with the musicality of the language. But if you're trying to sit here and figure out what's actually going on, it just takes up too much time, and it's sort of not. It's not that it's not pleasurable, because it can be quite fun, but it's not really reading. It's a puzzle, and you're sitting there trying to figure it out. And I was sort of hunched over looking at these websites that kind of explain a lot of the stuff that's going on, and I did enjoy it to a certain degree. But it's as if that kind of reading, whatever you want to call it, I don't really have time for that when I'm going to go back into teaching, because it will just it'll frustrate me, I know. In a way that the slow pace of reading Miss Macintosh isn't frustrating me. Reading Miss Macintosh is still sort of almost meditative in nature because of the book. And a few of you may already have seen the fact that Chris Villa from Leaf by Leaf has posted an absolutely amazing analysis of the novel recently, and I'm sort of hesitating to watch it all, because I'm not that you can really spoil the book, but I just watched a little bit more of it, and everything he says is so spot on with my own experience of reading it. So amazing. Like, he says things like, there was a part about how it's not postmodern, it's not lighting a torch to sort of put itself on fire. It's not like, who does he all mention? Some people. And then he says something about how it's a cross between Thomas Mann and Kafka, which is, I'm not sure about the Mann, but Kafkaesque for sure. And it's modernist. It's modernist. It's not postmodern in a certain sense, although, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm also thinking of something like Gaddis and how it compares to Gaddis. I mean, I do think there are some parallels there, a little bit. But it's an amazing piece of fiction. And it's still very hard to describe, because the sentences, just kind of go on and on and on, but you're still enthralled by it. So that's the project that is continuing. And I think that's all I'll say about this week, because it is going to be around. He read it over the course of a month, which for him is a long time. And, I'm just going to take my sweet time. It will be there. It's a patient book, I think. And at some point, you all, some of you will maybe pick up the Dalkey archive copy. It's just pure coincidence or luck that I happened to look at my library's holdings and saw that they had a copy, and they went and got it out of storage, and now I can kind of almost consider this copy my copy, even though I'm supposed to give it back. I will. Yeah, so that's going well. And the audiobook is still going well. I'm still enjoying it. Despite its ludicrously complex plot. One sort of thing that he's quite good at doing is, so there's all these sort of factions, and they're all getting ready for a big showdown with the bad guys, so to speak. And so one faction, I'm not very good with the names of all these groups. There was, I forget what they're called. Anyway, there's one faction, and so they have to fight these creatures that I've decided to call dragon. They're kind of like dragons, even though in the book they have a completely different name. Kachen Chimali. Yes, they're kind of, I looked at the wiki, and they look like dragons to me. But this group has to fight them, and so, but then what he's doing as an author is he hones in on a recruit, so a new person to this band of soldiers, and so you kind of, and you see the older people in the group, what's a group of soldiers called? I forget. Not an army, smaller than the battalion or whatever. kind of watching over her and seeing how she does, and she does quite well apparently. So then you have the sort of the narrative of the young person who is proving themselves. And actually, one thing I really like about this world, however violent it is, and it's full of creatures ripping each other to shreds and everything, but the actual world itself, the sort of is very egalitarian. Like there's a lot of hierarchical stuff, but it's more to do with the inner machinations of the different tribes or factions. In terms of, you know, people on you know, soldiers and stuff, or in power, they can be male, female, or other, and there seems to be no distinction there, which is really kind of refreshing and quite easy to do. You know, you don't have to replicate structures if you don't want to, and he obviously has made this choice to not do that, and bravo for him. And it doesn't take anything away from anything else in terms of excitement or when you read it, not at all. I mean, I guess, you know, it's still kind of a very traditional type of narrative, but it's got all these innovations embedded in it, and it's really well done. So that's a fun thing to listen and sometimes dip into reading, if only to figure out what page I'm on. I always like listen and then see, oh, how much have I read of this book? And so yeah, that's still going well. And let's see what else is on. Oh yeah, the new one here, the Fathers and Sons, which I should have done more of, but I've been I've been doing a little bit more prep work, so work has started, but I have been falling down stupid rabbit holes or interesting rabbit holes, you know, to do with kind of theory and philosophy and even music. One thing, for some reason last night when I couldn't go to sleep, I kind of came across, it was a tweet, but then it was about this Congolese, one of the most famous Congolese singers, Grand Calais. And I decided I really like African jazz, and I was sort of listening to and then looking into the whole connection to the Belgian Congo and the awful sort of things that the Belgian king and whatever did to the poor people of Congo, and how this singer, the Grand Calais, was actually involved in the round tables that took place in Belgium, I think, I'm not sure, 60s, maybe earlier, to sort of, you know, talk about this stuff. And the music's just really, I like it a lot, even though I'm not really a jazz person, but African jazz is different, and it's just kind of pleasant and sort of uplifting, and which may seem surprising, but I think sometimes there's a tension there between the words and the music, but that's interesting too. So yeah, Grand Calais is my latest musical find. As I said, I have very eclectic tastes in music. So let's get to this novel that I've started. I'm only on page 79, which isn't as, you know, it's a pretty slim little thing. I could have, you know, pushed through and finished more of it, but I'm just me. I am distracted. And I do like it. It's from 1862, so Turgenev, and it's called Fathers and Sons. So you might think it's about a father and a son, but it's actually more like, so far at least, about a father and his brother who's kind of decided to just be an aesthete and live the English style, but not really do much with his life. And it's as if I'm almost missing the maximalist approach, because I sort of need more explanation into, or insight into, his character as to why he did this. It sort of seems to be quickly brushed over, or he sort of outlines it schematically as to why the brother, Pavel, I think is the brother. Names are going to be an issue, but you know what? In this Oxford edition, there's a list of the names in the back here. See if I can find it. So yeah, Pavel is the brother of the father, and the father is Nikolai Kizanov, the Kizanovs. And so Pavel had some kind of love affair, and it's not sort of thoroughly examined enough for me to be completely satisfied with why he's become the way he is. But then it does focus on the son, Arkady, Arkady, and his extremely annoying, if I may say so, friend Bazarov, Evgeny Bazarov. So if any of you read this book, maybe you know who I'm talking about. I could not. He's a nihilist. So he's sort of, but he's such a sort of poser. You know, maybe are all nihilist posers? He comes in, he's always flouncing about and lying, like putting his feet up on the chair of other people's houses. Like he's extremely rude and like as a guest, he's really annoying, and he's throwing his weight around in terms of his opinions and what he thinks about everything. He's bossing Arkady. He's much more the strong personality, and the actual son is sort of receding in the background. And Bazarov's kind of, I mean, he's supposed to be annoying, I think, but and there too, there's a sort of, it's too harsh to say shallowness, but it's as if there's not enough nuance here for my liking. The writing is adequate; it's not bad at all, but it's also not Tolstoy, and it's also not Dostoevsky, which I think maybe is unfair. But and even the way the story's going, it's sort of like, it seems to, I don't know why, it's not as gripping, or it's just maybe not as good as those two, you know. I mean, I remember even the last thing I did with Dostoevsky was just to listen. I listened to Crime and Punishment, and it's just such a strange story, but it pulls you in. It pulls you in, these strange kind of, and part of why it pulls you in is sort of like, well, what is going on here? And why are they talking? Why is he talking to this guy in the bar and and having these long conversations? And you just don't get that quite the same way with Turgenev, with Father and Son. It's more just sort of the story that he's telling. It seems to me more like a society novel. You know, it's more the external as opposed to the internal, which is fine. But that's what I really love about, you know, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Tolstoy is really good at both. He's good at the outside, but then the inside, and then kind of how the two kind of interact. And maybe this is just a different type of novel. It is a lot shorter. It's quite short. So we'll see how things go with the plot. I'm about a little under halfway there. And I will report back next week, sorry, not next year. And then what else is going on? Well, this came in the mail. Speaking of Margaret Young, yet again. So this is her book that I found online for not much money. And I'm really, really excited. It's got this kind of protective cover. And it's also scribbled with the people who published her. And so this is an earlier work. This is her work on New Harmony, the utopian community at the really, really bottom edge corner of Indiana that I have been to and was kind of interested in. We did an interesting tour of New Harmony quite a few years ago. We lived in Indiana because I taught at this strange college, Wabash, and I want to read it, and I've kind of already said I would participate in another Twitter group read in March, but I'm not sure if I really can, you know, first of all, time, but also I'll still be reading Miss Macintosh, and I don't really want to, I don't know if I can do, the lady who organizes all these read-alongs said 10 pages a day, which, it's got a really interesting old book smell. I don't know if I can handle 10 pages. Well, 10 pages isn't that bad, but I want to read it because I want to sort of compare it to Miss Macintosh. And it's got an introduction by Mark Van Doren, the English professor whose son was the center of that movie quiz show. So yeah, that's one little purchase that came in. And I think we're almost at the end, but let me think. We'll show you two options for what I'll read next. I know I have all the other things that I talked about last time, so the on being blue and some other things. What are the other things were there? Can't remember. Anyway, I'm still kind of leaning towards shorter works because of Miss Macintosh, so I don't want to overcommit myself. And so two things that are on my shelf, for some reason the Italian stuff's still pulling me in. I don't quite know. So we read one fairy tale, and I read the Elena Ferrenti's a while ago. I don't know why, but anyway, I had this on my shelf, and I think it'd be interesting to read some Calvino. Actually, you know what? I don't think I've ever read any Calvino. I should remedy that. So I'm interested in this Marco Valdo, which I think is a group of stories, like related stories. And I'm intrigued by the first one because it's called Mushrooms in the City, and I have a thing for mushrooms. when did he publish this? 63, so not that much after the Leopard, which is interesting. So yeah, maybe I should read some Calvino. What? Cuba? I didn't know that. Cuba? It says something about he was in Cuba. He was born in Cuba and grew up in San Remo, Italy. Interesting. I know he did some fairy tales. So yeah, there's that one. And then, so these other people who all read the same things, one of their heroes is Joseph McElroy, who I would never have heard of it, except for, you know, people who, this group who really like him, and apparently he's really interesting. So this is a library sale purchase from a while back, and so it was cheap, and I'm kind of intrigued by it. So it's another sort of family. No, 1988 is pretty late, actually, isn't it? He's still with us. Is he still with us? I don't know. Anyway, so that's another option. It's also kind of short, so not too hard. And yeah, we'll see. I think that's about it, though. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you all. New subscribers. Hello, hello, hello. Comment away. Tell me if you have read any of these things. Or if you want me to talk about something, I might, once I start teaching the fairy tales, I'll show you at least what we're reading. Like the first thing we read is a chapter from a book. I'll tell you next time. I'll show it to you when I bring it home so I can reread it again. But yeah, that's going to be starting up. Hope everyone's doing well, and I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.